I think Cuba's the end. All my life I've been hearing about the United States and Cuba. When will the United States do it? I do believe I'll be having the honor of taking Cuba. That'd be good. That's a big honor.
Taking Cuba.
Taking Cuba in some form, yeah. Taking Cuba. I mean, whether I free it, take it, I think I could do anything I want with it. You want to know the truth? They're a very weakened nation.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the Midas Touch Network. Sometimes I'll watch a video of Donald Trump like this one, and it is so unhinged that I'll have to double check that it's not AI generated. This statement about Cuba is exactly the kind of thing we have been warning about. A mad king with a lust for power, thinking he can take anything he wants by force.
Did you just hear that? The President of the United States on camera said he could do anything he wants with Cuba. Not free it, not liberate it, not negotiate with it. Take it. That word matters, because that is not the language of a president. That is the language of a conqueror. And here is what is not being reported on mainstream television right now. There is a retired 3-star military lawyer, one of the top legal minds in the entire United States Armed Forces, who is raising a very serious alarm. His name is Major General Stephen Lepper. He spent 35 years as a military JAG officer. He knows exactly how military law works, and he is saying the quiet part out loud. The Trump administration has been systematically removing the military's top legal watchdogs, the people whose only job was to say this order is illegal. You cannot do this. Those people are now gone. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what that means and why it should frighten every single American regardless of party.
Which begs the question, when and how will the military stand up to him? I asked retired Air Force Major General Stephen Lepper to join me to talk about this. General Lepper served for 35 years as a JAG officer, including as Deputy Judge Advocate General, one of the military's top lawyers. He is also one of the country's foremost experts on military law, unlawful orders, and the legal limits of executive power. Here's our conversation. General Lepper, thank you so much for joining me today. I get a lot of feedback from my audience about why the military, why the people in the military from the leadership on down are going along with this. And I would love your insight into the difference between a stupid order and an illegal order, because they are very distinct things and the obligations as a service member are different depending on which one you get.
Let me stop right there, because that question is the most important question in American politics right now. Why is the military going along with this? Here is what you need to understand first. The U.S. military does not operate on blind obedience. It never has. Under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, known as the UCMJ, every service member has a legal duty. They must follow lawful orders, and they must refuse unlawful ones. That is the law. It has been the law since after World War II. But here is the critical problem the general is pointing to. The UCMJ does not clearly define what an unlawful order actually is. Think about that. The law that governs millions of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines does not give them a clean definition of the line they cannot cross. The easy examples. Yes, those are clear. My Lai, Vietnam Lieutenant Calley ordered soldiers to massacre civilians. That was murder. That order was illegal. Period. Abu Ghraib, Iraq soldiers were ordered to torture prisoners in American custody. That was illegal. Period. But what about today? What about an order to strike a target in the Gulf with no clear explanation of why that target is legitimate? What about military forces being used on US soil against civilians? What about a president who says out loud that he can take a sovereign nation because he wants to? The general is telling us something crucial. The line between a stupid order and an illegal one is harder to draw than most people think. And the people whose job it was to draw that line for military commanders? Pete Hegseth just fired them. This is important. I need you to stay with me for the next few minutes, because what happened inside the Pentagon earlier this year is one of the most alarming stories that is not on your evening news. What you're looking at right now is real. In February 2025, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth fired the top lawyers for the Army and the Air Force. These were 3-star generals, senior military officers, the legal conscience of the U.S. Armed Forces. The New York Times reported it. The Senate Armed Services Committee demanded answers, and Senator Jack Reed called it a betrayal of public trust. Hegseth's own words told us why he did it. He wanted to dispense with stupid rules of engagement. Those stupid rules are what prevent American soldiers from committing war crimes. We are not exaggerating. That is not political spin. That is military law.
The threshold, though, for determining the illegality of an order is really high. I mean, like you said, it's easy when it's My Lai. It should be easy when it's Abu Ghraib. But when it comes to the kinds of orders our sailors, soldiers, airmen, and Marines are getting in the Gulf right now, there isn't a clear example to me yet of an illegal order. There are certainly stupid orders, and the planning or the lack of planning that went into this is just a striking indictment of this administration's incompetence. But when an airman gets an order to go strike a target without a very clear indication that that's an illegitimate target, which almost never happens, there is an obligation under the UCMJ to carry out that order.
I want you to really absorb what the general just said. He said there is no clear illegal order yet. Yet, that word yet is doing a lot of work, because here is what he is also telling us. He is telling us that our pilots right now are carrying out strikes, and unless they personally know the target is a church, a school, or a crowd of civilians, they are legally obligated to do it. Think about what that means in practice. A 25-year-old Air Force pilot gets an order. He doesn't know the full intelligence picture. He doesn't know what the Secretary of Defense was thinking when he said no stupid rules of engagement. He doesn't know if the lawyers who normally review that target list were fired 6 months ago. He just knows he has an order. And the law says, follow it. This is the architecture of unaccountable war. This is how atrocities happen. Not with mustache-twirling villains giving cartoon evil orders, but with regular people following procedures inside a system that has had its guardrails quietly removed. I believe, and I want to be clear, this is my opinion, that the firing of the JAG officers was not just bureaucratic reshuffling. I believe it was preparation. Preparation to use military force in ways that the military's own legal officers would have blocked or at minimum flagged and documented. The Human Rights Watch reported in March 2026 that Hegseth's no stupid rules of engagement statement in the context of the Iran conflict was a direct assault on the legal framework that has governed American warfare since the Geneva Conventions. Every American should know this. This did not happen by accident. This is why this matters right now. In November 2025, a group of United States senators and representatives, including Senator Elisa Slotkin, released a video directed straight at military service members. They said, "You must refuse illegal orders. No one has to carry out orders that violate the law or our Constitution." CNN reported it. Navy Times reported it. The BBC reported it. This is not a partisan talking point. This is elected officials looking at what is happening inside the U.S. military and feeling the need to speak directly to troops on American soil. Think about how serious it has to be for lawmakers to take that step. The general we just heard is part of a larger group of retired military lawyers who are saying the same thing, that the guardrails are coming down and every service member needs to know where the legal line is. Because if they don't know, they become the instrument not of democracy, but of something much more dangerous.
Can you talk about the mantle of responsibility you wear as a JAG, or you wore as a JAG, and please editorialize for us on the DoD's decision to eliminate some of those senior JAG positions and to, as Pete Hegseth said, dispense with stupid rules of engagement?
Yeah, well, you mentioned the firing of the Judge Advocates General. Specifically, back in February of last year, Secretary Hegseth fired the Army and Air Force Judge Advocates General. And for those folks who don't understand how the JAG Corps is organized, the Judge Advocates General are the senior military lawyers in each of those services. At the time, they served as 3-star generals, and now their successors are 2-star generals. Bottom line is, one of the things that I and a number of my colleagues who are former and retired JAGs were worried about was that the firing of the TJAGs signaled an effort to essentially remove JAGs as obstacles for whatever the administration wanted to do with the military. And sure enough, we were right. We have seen since then a number of situations where the military is being misused. In some cases, we argue illegally, to advance the agenda of this administration. And so as a JAG, it was my responsibility when I served to advise commanders, as you said, advise commanders not only on the laws of armed conflict when we were engaged in military operations, but also on matters of good order and discipline. As the JAG, I was responsible for administering the Uniform Code of Military Justice. I worked with commanders who had to make decisions about whether or not to prosecute someone for offenses they committed. And we would together ensure that accountability occurred whenever a military member violated the law, disobeyed the law. So, when you say the mantle of responsibility, it is a significant responsibility. We have a saying in the military: JAGs advise and commanders decide, which basically means we provide legal advice to commanders who then have to make the decisions about whether or not to prosecute. But what that does is it trivializes the significant role that JAGs have in providing that advice to commanders who, in most cases, will follow the advice that their JAGs.
A retired three-star general just told you in plain English that the United States military is being misused and in some cases used illegally to advance the political agenda of this administration. Let me say that again slowly. The United States military, our military, the most powerful armed force in the history of this planet, is being misused illegally. This is not an activist. This is not a pundit. This is not a Democrat or a Republican. This is a man who spent 35 years inside the legal spine of the U.S. Armed Forces, a man whose entire career was dedicated to making sure American soldiers operated within the law, and the people like him, the generals, who served as the military's legal conscience, were fired quietly on February 21, 2025, while most of America was paying attention to something else. The Washington Post editorial board wrote that the firing of those JAG officers removed the last credible check on illegal military orders inside the Pentagon. Now add to this what Trump said about Cuba. I think I could do anything I want with it. This is not one isolated statement. This is a pattern. Panama, Greenland, Canada, Cuba. These are not jokes. These are signals from a president who has now removed the legal officers from his own military who would have said, "Mr. President, you cannot do that. That is illegal." I believe, and I want to be very clear, this is my opinion, that the American people are watching something that has no modern precedent: the deliberate, systematic dismantling of the legal limits on presidential military power. The founders of this country were terrified of exactly this: a king, a leader with an army and no law. Your voice matters. Your awareness matters. The fact that you are watching this video and sharing it matters more than you know. Because right now, the only check left is an informed, outraged, engaged American public. That is you. Do not look away.
And sure enough, we were right. We have seen since then a number of situations where the military is being misused